Okay, this is video number 5. This is the last video. I'm going to finish this painting on this video. You know, I call it a painting, but is it a painting? There's no paint here. It's just manipulation of pixels, but I can't stop myself from calling it a painting. It feels like a painting. I decided to start this video in real time, so this is not sped up at all. This is actually me painting for the first few minutes or so here, just so you can kind of see that, you know, it really is a scrubby kind of paint. I'm kind of sketching the paint on there, you know, much like you would if you were coloring with crayons or pastels, you know. You know, people that paint, like I think I mentioned this before, in oils, you know, sometimes every single stroke matters, and if they don't get a stroke right, they'll wipe it off, you know, trying to go for a really painterly style. I love that kind of work, but that's not what I do, and probably would really struggle trying to do that, especially now since I'm using like millions of strokes on my paintings. But anyway, what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to continually lighten some more, seeing that this background is a little too dark, and being that I work primarily in the children's market, I always have to watch how dark I let things get. And this painting in general is probably, in many respects, for a lot of editors' tastes, probably still going to be too dark, even when I'm finished. But in order to have really, really bright, vibrant colors and bright lighting situations, you've got to have dark to juxtapose against the light. So since this is a personal piece, just one that I did for this video, I figured I'd let it stay in the dark area just a little bit more, because it's more fun for me to actually have these really vibrant colors, this lighting situation. But if I were doing this for a client, for a children's book client, I would probably lighten it even more. And for some art directors, it'd be fine. So I'm getting ready to speed it up again. And you'll see we're getting ready to hit this transition where it speeds up. 3, 2, 1. There we go. So that's double time right there. And I'm putting a little green in this little girl's face. And if you examine the human skin, human faces especially, you will see just about every color in the rainbow in there. Now, of course, they're not as vibrant. They're not as saturated. But you'll find greens, blues, purples, oranges, reds, yellows, browns, you name it. Every single color can be in a face. And depending on the lighting that you are using, you know, sometimes there will be more or less. You know, if you're outside, if your subject is outside in the sunlight in the middle of the day, the midday sun washes out color. It's so bright that the highlights and all that light bouncing around just completely eats up color. In the morning sunlight, you'll have more color in skin tones, and at dusk, of course, the sweet light, you have really, really warm, typically warm colors hitting the face. Just kind of working this, you know, whenever I work on children's faces and that, I've had to just kind of realize that they're going to look like a train wreck until the very end. And it's really frustrating, and almost on every face I am questioning, you know, am I going to be able to make this work? I've had so many failures over time that I'm kind of still always a little bit gun shy, like, am I going to have to scrap this? Now working digitally, I don't worry about that because at worst case I just erase some paint off or turn down the layer a little bit. Um, One thing I should mention is when you turn down the opacity of a layer, if you flatten that layer to another layer, you cannot get that mm, the full the 100% of that layer back again. The 100% of the opacity. So let's say you're painting on the top layer and you're liking what you have, but you feel like the paint is a little too heavy or something. So you turn down the opacity, or let's say you turn down the opacity just so you can see your sketch underneath, and you forget to turn it back to 100%, and you flatten it. You're stuck with that muted value and color on that layer. It will be flattened as you turned it down. So if you turn it down to 30%, it'll be flattened in at 30%. Something that I have made a mistake on quite a few times. So you have to kind of had to learn the hard way on that one. Just want to put a little detail on this little girl's clothing. I'm picturing them in their pajamas. I don't know why, but I'm just thinking, maybe their story is, that they're, who knows, maybe these guys are traveling and, they found this frog to help them along the way. Maybe they've been kidnapped, by the frog queen or something. Maybe they, this is their, maybe they're in a world where you travel around by frog, and it's just normal to travel by frog. Who knows? I guess I could talk about color and texture in the halftone areas right now. And so one thing that I really like about painting this way with the texture and the texture palette versus putting a texture on top of your painting at the end, which is what a lot of people have tried to get me to do when they were trying to say get me to go digital, is I felt like that would not work for me, because one of the things that I really like is parts of my painting having a sort of a real world lighting situation, kind of to feel like they're actually 3D, like there's actually light hitting the children or the objects in my paintings. I don't want them to look realistic, but I want them to look like, I've got this world that has characteristics of our world, and where light and shadow behave relatively the same. And if you put a texture on at the end of your painting, what you're going to have is virtually the same texture throughout the whole painting. And what you'll notice, I think, is if you look at this, is that the texture falls off in the dark areas. If you look at this little girl's hair, in the dark areas, you really can't see any texture. In the light areas, you can, and especially in the halftone, in the highlights, when you see especially the highlights on the frog, the texture will drop out again in the highlights, and that's actually what our world looks like. If you look at an object that's got some texture to it, let's say an orange or something, and you light it with a harsh light, okay, the orange has texture. We know it has texture all the way around it, but you won't see it in the shadow areas like you will in the halftone areas, and you also won't see it in the highlight. In the very brightest white of the highlight, the texture will be dissipated, or will be washed out by the light. So when I wanted to paint digitally, I really was like always kind of dreaming of a situation where the computer could actually virtually see the texture and behave the same way, so that when I put light on it, it kind of disappears. Because this is what happens in my paintings. The darker areas, you don't see texture. Some of the paintings that I've seen people do where they put texture on it in the end, it doesn't feel it feels like there's a texture or something over top of the painting. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel. I mean, it just feels like you can kind of tell how it was done. And again, I don't like that sort of approach. I don't feel like it works for me. Um, that's not to say that you couldn't come up with a really beautiful. I mean, I think for everything I say, there's going to be an exception. For any rule or any principle that anybody teaches you in art, or something that works for them, you're going to be able to find an exception to that. You know, um, so it's a matter of opinion. It's a matter of preference a lot. But the other thing is that color finds itself in the halftone as well. And so if you look at, especially if you look on the frog, when I zoom out, most of the color is found in the halftone area. And, the color drops off in the shadow areas. It cools down. But you'll find the most vibrant colors in the transition from halftone to core shadow and in the halftone area. And again, they wash out in the highlights and they disappear in the shadows. And just knowing that happens in real life can actually help you as you're painting, because you can say to yourself, I'm trying to make this look more realistic, and what can I do? And you start looking at it and you're going, oh, there's not that much color in the halftone area, so I'm gonna put some more color in there. And I mentioned before, a great way to do that, if you feel like you don't have enough color and you need to throw a little bit more color in there, is to get another layer and to make it a multiply layer. So change it from normal to multiply, and then just wash some color in there without texture, so it saturates that area, and then you can work your lights back up on top of it on another layer. One of the challenges that I've always faced with working on little children and babies is getting a really smooth, rounded shape and simplification to the face, and real smooth transitions in the paint. And I think where people go wrong, and where I've definitely gone wrong before on doing children's faces, is that I have just put too much detail in. Just put too many plane changes or shape changes. If you look at this little baby, it's just very, very, the head is just very, very round. That's what babies look like. Everything is rounded. And you just won't go wrong by just rounding everything and not putting anything extra in there. Just trying to simplify it down really far, and you'll end up with a cuter little baby that way. I've drawn a lot of kids that I've been accused of in the past of, and rightly so, of drawing kids that look like old people, and just because, for one reason or another, I've had too much texture in the face, or I've just not drawn it very well, where I've got bumps and things in there, so it ends up looking like a wrinkled person rather than a smooth little young person skin. What I'm doing here is I've realized that, unfortunately, because I didn't draw this out and spend the time, I'm going to pay for it right here. The baby was just too big, and so I had to basically cut it out and reduce it down in size. The reason I put the jaggies on there is it's easier to blur a jagged line than it is to blur a cut straight line. And so with the lasso tool, I just kind of made, holding down the Alt button. Now, of course, I'm on a PC. It's probably going to be different on the Mac, but there's a button you can hold down, and if you don't know it, just Google it. It'll tell you, you might Google something like working with the lasso or hotkeys lasso, Photoshop. Type those in Google. Someone will have written about it. But anyway, it's easier to blur the line um, after you've made a jagged line. Working on these little faces is tedious, and I mean, it's just a lot of fooling with it, a lot of back and forth, a lot of painting and overpainting and repainting and erasing until you get it right. And it just kind of becomes a feeling over time. Stepping back, maybe working on another part of the painting, going back. You'll see me. I'm gonna work on the little girl again. The more time that you have away from looking at your little character's face, the more time you have to kind of come back and get a fresh look at it. So I'm just kind of looking around here for things to do. And this part at the end, I mean, we're getting pretty close to the end here. This stuff sometimes just takes forever. Here I've just found a piece of reflection that wasn't supposed to be there. There's nothing that it's reflecting off of, so I'm fixing that area. And this again comes to this little part of the painting. Most people wouldn't even notice it, but I notice it, and it's my painting, and it bothers me, so I don't want it in there. And I've done enough paintings where I'm sick of myself. What I'm trying to do now is not get this mushroom too red, because I don't want it to detract, but I want it to just be a complement element in there. But, I already know what level I'm capable of, and I know what level I'm not. Well, I know that I have left things like that in my painting before and tried to be fine with it. And, it's just, it's bugged me later on. And so now, I fix things like that. Who knows, in a few more years or so, or less, there might be things in this painting, there probably will be things in this painting that I look back on and go, I can't believe I left this the way it was, I should have changed this or that, or worked on this or that a little bit more. Excuse me. And just kind of working on this little basket a little bit, moving around the painting, looking for things to do. Gonna perfect this area again. It can just take forever fixing things, and there's more things on here actually that I knew I could have spent more time fixing, but I felt like for this digital painting, viewed at when viewed at screen size, they wouldn't even be seen. So, I didn't worry about it. I might actually go back in and take a look at a few things later on, just because I'm thinking about releasing prints in my web store, and making some larger little prints to go out, and so I want to make sure that that this looks good, blown up a little bit. Still got the spots in there on the frog. I've kept them till the bitter end, hoping that I would start to like them, and I'm starting to realize at this point that I'm just not going to, and that I'm going to have to deal with them. But I just want to fix this little basket up here. Fixing edges, analyzing, looking, asking yourself questions. Is this good enough? Does it read? Does it tell the story that it's supposed to? I mean, to most people looking at this digital painting right now, it's good to go out the door as is, and again, that just comes back to the levels that you're willing to live with. What are you comfortable with? And I can tell you, as a student, I was willing to live with, a 2-hour painting. And, this painting here, it's hard because I didn't really time the whole thing, because, there's painting time, but then there's zooming out and looking at your painting time as well. And there were those times I turned the recorder off when I wasn't painting. So here it's finally time to paint these spots out because they're just not working. So I'm just going to continue this texture and paint these out. And sometimes you learn as you go along in your painting, that there are things that you just didn't really solve in the sketch stage, or that things that just work well in a sketch but don't work well in color. So this was one of them that just kind of, the reason that they weren't working for me is that the texture on the frog was interesting enough, and it was just overkill to have another pattern running on top. So get rid of them. So I think I was talking about something, but now I've lost my train of thought on that one. Maybe it'll come back. Shucks. Well, one thing that I could talk about right now is that I have, in my designs, one of my goals is to make the picture look like, to make it, well, to have a good design so that everything has a place. But the way that I do that is actually to almost envision, making a puzzle and fitting the pieces together. So, when I zoom out again, you'll notice that there's a place for everything. That the grass doesn't bump into the kids' heads. That the grass on the side of the frog goes around the frog. Things that, you can see right there, the leaf doesn't hit the eye of the frog. If you're not designing and you just start drawing, you'll have things that bump into other things, or that barely almost touch something, but not quite. And in illustration, we call those tangents. A tangency is, something that you don't want. It's a distraction. It draws attention to an area that shouldn't have attention, or it draws attention to an area that should have attention, but not from a tangency. And so, in the real world, if this frog were hopping along with some kids in it, in their real world, and it stopped on a rock, chances are, from most angles that the viewer would view it, there would be grass interfering with this picture. And there would be, maybe there would be a bug in the foreground that would be right in front of the frog's eye or something. And so if you were just to, let's say you were in this world and you had a camera, and the frog kind of comes in and hops onto that rock, and you happen to be standing in a certain area and you just snap a picture, it's not gonna be designed well. There's going to be things that are overlapping, or things that are bumping into other things, like I said, that are not ideal. And that's why, as a photographer, to take a good picture, you got to move around and find the best shot, that the best place to take your picture. And most people do that naturally when they take pictures. They'll move, and especially if someone's standing in your way, if you're in a crowded area, you'll move, and if there's a pole in your way, you'll move around it and things. And that's what you do as an illustrator. You're designing the ideal shot. Why put grass right in front of the frog when you can step aside and move that grass off to the side? So that all happens when you're designing your sketch. And to have a really good picture, you've got to take the time and the care to do exactly that. You got to get in there and say, well, what would be ideal? What size would be ideal? Sometimes when we paint or we draw some characters, they don't have much impact. Here I am. I'm going to put a little bit more color in that halftone area. So I'm putting some more bright green in there. But sometimes people will make their subject matter too small in a painting, and it just doesn't have impact. So one of my goals is with a lot of the pictures that I make, is I don't want to have there be any mistake that there's going to be a big impact with size and with with the scale of the characters. I want them relatively close up. Um, I don't do well with crowd scenes, although those are definitely valid exercises. If I do have a lot of characters in a scene, I'll try to make sure that there's a strong foreground element to add interest. Um, and that's something that you should try to have in your pictures. Is in general, is a background, a middle ground, excuse me, a background, a middle ground, and a foreground. And in this one, it's mostly, if that frog didn't have the kids on him. So here I'm adding some orange again, and again trying to add some interest to the coloring of this frog. I'm erasing some of that orange and putting some yellow in place there. And this is a multiplied layer, so you experiment with this. This could be considered a glaze if you were doing oil painting or something, or acrylic. One way to really enhance and enrich your color is to do glazes. And so, for lack of a better description, could be considered a glaze. And I'm just trying to work this. I'm putting yellow and orange as intense as I can in this area, and trying not to cover up too much, but trying to just to enhance the color. So I turn off the layer and evaluate it, turn it back on, toggle it on and off. And one of the things this is just one of the things that I love about painting with color, is just getting to that point where you have grayed out colors in your painting. So you can see under the frog's lip, and in the background you've got some grays and some neutrals, but then really coming into where the colors can be intensified, and just that's just something that just makes me happy. I just love color. And just going back in now on a normal layer on top of that glaze, and putting in some more opaque whitish yellow to really enhance the highlight areas. And that's why I'm saying you want to put your color in, and then you put the light on top. You put the shadows in and the color, and then the light areas go on top of that. That's if you're painting opaque. Now I'm going to crop this image down. I don't need all that extra anymore. And so I've cropped it here. Wrapping up this painting. I guess the last thing that I really wanted to get in to talk about a little bit is that I really believe in finding inspiration. Here I'm fooling with the saturation level, bumping it up just about 10% or so. That's under image, I believe, because I don't have Photoshop in front of me right now. Image adjustment, hue saturation, and then you adjust the saturation on there. Of course, you got to sign it, right? And I think I'm working in real time right now again. I know, yeah, I am. Okay, so here's the end. But have your inspirations, find people that you love. I love looking at the work of Nicoletta Sicily and Jim Madsen and Corey Godby and Justin Gerard and Steve Johnson and Lou Fancher and Peter DeCive and Polly Bernatene, and many, many more. I have my heroes. I check on their work all the time. And by being inspired by others, it will help you to get excited about your work and really want to push it and do better work. And that's it. This is my painting. I had a lot of fun making this, and I hope you had a lot of fun watching. I know some parts of it were probably boring, but I hope you had a good time I hope it helps you in your work.